On one edge, the smoke of a besieged castle. On the other, the sound of a village bell announcing the death of another infant. In between are endless fields, scorched forests, and country roads along which millions of nameless lives go, die, flee, and return. This is where the real story of the Middle Ages begins. Not in the chronicles of kings, but in the dirt, pain, and agony of ordinary people. The world we are traveling to is devoid of everything that seems basic today. Electricity, heating, medicine, human rights, clean water. Even the very concept of personal freedom is an unattainable luxury. There is no future in this world, only field, duty, prayer, and fear. According to the records of chroniclers of the 15th centuries, the average life expectancy did not exceed 28-32 years, and this figure became a reality only if the child lived to the 5th year of life, which did not manage to almost half of the babies. Women had to give birth dozens of times to ensure that at least one heir survived. Men died in the field, on the road, of fever, in war, or in an unfortunate fall from a cart. Almost 90% of the population are peasants. They do not own land, but they are obliged to feed everyone higher up the chain. The feudal lord, his knights, the monastery, the tax collectors. One bad harvest, one rainstorm out of a season, and famine begins. Bread is diluted with ashes and ground bark. People eat roots, ragwort, rotten fish. Sometimes they eat each other. Labor nonstop, from dawn till dark, hands in abrasions, knees in the ground. Sickness is constant. No soap, no bandages, no idea how to stop infection. Malaria, dysentery, gangrene, typhoid. Every wound is a potential death. Help from an herbalist or a monk with only prayer, a leech, and a knife. The clothes are of coarse wool. The house is made of clay, straw, and wood. The window is a hole in the wall. The stove smokes. The hearth smokes. The floor is earthen. During the winter months, the temperature inside is almost the same as outside. People warm their bodies, sleeping in a pile, sometimes with animals. The church is the ultimate judge in fear. It is she who decides who lives according to the will of God and who serves the devil. Witches are sought out among widows, lonely women, herbalists. Torture is part of interrogation. Public executions are not an excess, but a spectacle for the people. Prison is not a place of confinement, but an expectation of death. The Inquisition does not whisper, it burns. War comes suddenly. It does not go through the front. It passes through the yards, takes the cattle, burns the crops, rapes, maims, and leaves, leaving behind hunger, sores, and emptiness. Peasants are conscripted with pitchforks and axes. There is no armor, no chance of survival. And all of this, with no concept of rights, no hope for help, no possibility of choice. Survival is for those who know how to do everything. Catch, gather, hide, silence, pray, heal, fight, endure. Not the strong, not the noble, but the one who knows when to keep silent, when to run, and how to start a fire without a spark. This is not a game. This is the reality you are now immersed in. Watch this video to the end and you'll find out what class you'd be in, what challenges you'd face, and how quickly your story would end if you were on the other side of the 13th century. In the early Middle Ages, man did not choose who to be. He was born into a structure built on land, blood, and subordination. Society was static, like a stone tower where everyone occupied a strictly defined place, and 9 people out of 10 were at the bottom of it. They were peasants, people on whose backs everything depended: food, taxes, stability, power. But they themselves had no rights, no voice, no hope. Their fate was sealed with the first cry. The law, formal and religious, reserved for them the status of service, serf. They did not belong to themselves. They belonged to the land. A peasant could not leave the village where he was born. He didn't know the written language. He didn't understand the language of authority. All laws were in Latin. All orders came from those above him. He was not a participant, but an object of decisions that determined his life. What to sow, how much to give, how much to pay, when to report to the barkina. To resist was to die. The house is not a shelter, but a temporary shelter. Earthen walls, thatched roof, oiled rags instead of glass. The floor is earthen, with goats underfoot. In a corner, straw on which the children sleep. In another is a hearth, the only source of heat and light. But the smoke clogs the lungs, leaving soot in the throat. Work began at first light and did not stop until dark. In spring, plowing; in summer, reaping; in fall, gathering; in winter, waiting. Even death did not exempt from the burden. If someone died, the living continued to pay. Famine was not a catastrophe, but a seasonal phenomenon. Meat was eaten a couple of times a year. They rarely drank water, more often weak beer to avoid poisoning. Women are the second engine of the village. They plowed, milked, knitted, cooked, gave birth. Without them, the village would die. But every birth is like walking on the edge of a knife. No help, no medicine. High infant mortality was the norm. Babies died, mothers died, and once again it was back to square one. Everyone towered over the peasant, the feudal lord, the judge, the priest, the tax collector. Each of them had power that could be used, and was used. Take away a sack of grain, publicly flog him, banish him, take away a child for debt. There was no one to complain. There was no excuse. This system did not work for the sake of justice, but for the survival of the upper class. The peasant was not a person, but a cog in the mechanism of the feudal world. He was born to work. He worked not to die. When he died, the next one took his place. The machine never stopped. But were there those who broke the system? Who ran away? Who rioted? Who fought their way up against all odds? There are stories like that. They're few, but they are there. Could you survive in this world where all life is submission and death is liberation? Watch the video to the end and you will find out if there was even a tiny chance to break out of this circle and what price you had to pay for it. In the rural Middle Ages, food was not a chore, it was a struggle. The diet of the commoner, especially the peasant, depended on nature, weather conditions, and the will of the feudal lord. He could not count on satiety, did not know the taste of satiety, and carried the constant threat of hunger. Food was not a choice but an accident. Not flavor but calories, not health but survival. The basis of nutrition was cereal crops. In the first place, barley, rye, millet, and in more southern regions, wheat. They were used to make porridge, thick chowder, and most importantly, bread. But this bread did not resemble the familiar loaf. It was dark, dense, sometimes stony, with inclusions of ash, bran, and other impurities to save grain. In famine years, ground roots, moss, tree bark, clay, and even flour from ground bones were added to the dough. Porridge was cooked with water, or more rarely, with diluted milk. They were salted lightly. Salt was an expensive commodity. Turnips, onions, garlic, and rarely legumes were added. Animal protein was almost absent. Meat appeared on the peasants' tables several times a year, during holidays or when a sick animal was slaughtered. To kill a healthy cow or pig without the landowner's permission meant breaking the law. Most meat was corned beef, smoked meats, and salted leftovers. There were no refrigerators, so the product spoiled quickly. Meat, fat, and lard were stored especially carefully. Olive oil was known only in the south of Europe. In the north, animal fats or butter were used, but peasants often limited themselves to toasted flour and water, a kind of gravy made of nothing. The milk soured quickly, especially in summer. It was drunk mostly by children. It was used to make cottage cheese, simple cheese, and less often butter. Chicken eggs were a valuable source of protein, but not a daily source. Chickens were kept not for eggs, but for exchange and ritual slaughter. The vegetable ration included turnips, rutabagas, cabbage, beans, leeks. Everything was grown in a vegetable garden near the house. Clean water is a luxury. In most villages, springs were polluted, both by people and animals. To avoid getting sick, they drank low-alcohol beer, brogue, and herbal infusions. Even children. Alcohol killed bacteria, and it saved lives. Beer was brewed at home from barley or rye without filtration or storage. It was cloudy, thick, with sediment. Wine was only available in the southern regions and only to the nobility. Intermidnight hunger strikes were part of a cycle. Months passed from the last harvest to the first green. All supplies, even grain for sowing, were eaten. Then came the hunger season from February to May. It was especially frightening after bad harvest years. Droughts, rains, locust invasions, or just a late spring could completely destroy the stocks. Sources of the 2030 to the 16th centuries mention starvation epidemics, death from exhaustion, cases of eating roots, dog meat, shoe leather. Sometimes it came to cannibalism. Chronicles speak of mothers killing babies to feed the survivors. The Great Famine of 1315-1317, which killed millions across Europe, was particularly terrible. Even outside the disaster period, the peasants' diet did not cover the body's needs. People lived in a constant energy deficit. Diseases developed: rickets, scurvy, avidominosis, constant infections. The body did not recover. Women gave birth to children without strength, and the children died of exhaustion. Peasants ate in order not to die, but could not really recover. Could you live on turnips, black bread, and swamp-flavored water? A medieval village does not smell of bread and hearth smoke. It smells of damp earth, excrement, blood, sweat, and decay. The air is not refreshing, it's pressurizing. There's no sewage. Slops, urine, kitchen scraps are thrown directly into the street. They flow into streams along the houses where children play knee-deep in mud, where cattle walk, where people die. Hygiene is not a habit, but an unknown word. Soap is rare and only for the rich. It is boiled with fat and ashes, but it smells acrid and is expensive. Cleansing the body is considered a questionable business. On the contrary, the thicker the layer of dirt on the skin, the less likely, according to superstition, that evil will penetrate the body. And that's no joke. Many people believe that water opened pores through which disease could enter. They bathe rarely, in the north, in rivers in summer. In the south, a little more often, if water is nearby, but not regularly, sometimes once a year for a holiday. Hot water is a luxury available in monasteries or bathhouses. But even city baths quickly turn into breeding grounds for syphilis and leprosy. And they still go there out of desperation. Clothes are not washed. They are worn until they rot. The smell of sweat, smoke, pus, and animals is normal. Lice and fleas are common neighbors. They are crushed with fingernails scraped off with a knife, spoken for. At night they lie down with them and get up. Fleas hide in the straw on which whole families sleep. They don't brush their teeth. Herbal chewing sticks only appear to a few. Commoners get decay, cavities, abscesses. Rotten teeth fall out by 25. Toothache is not just misery, but a pathway to deadly blood poisoning. Removal with pliers only, sometimes with a rock. Wounds are not treated but bandaged with a dirty cloth or left as they are. Only the monastery brother knows medicine, but he uses the knowledge of Pliny and Galen, doctors who died more than 1,000 years ago. The main methods are bloodletting, herbs, prayer, surgery, no anesthesia. Limbs are cut off, abscesses are removed, abscesses are opened with a knife. They're not afraid of pain, they're afraid of infection. But it's almost impossible to avoid it. No antiseptics, no antibiotics, no anesthesia. Instead, there's calamine, alcohol infusion, rag in the teeth. Best case scenario, they pass out. At worst, they scream until the end. Everyday illnesses that today are cured in 3 days were then a sentence. There are no doctors in the village. There is a witch doctor. She has wormwood decoction, burdock tincture, and incantation. Sometimes it helps, but more often it doesn't. Then the priest is called, he prays, and the funeral. Medieval man lives amidst brucellosis, dysentery, malaria, smallpox, typhus, leprosy, parasites. He doesn't fear them. He just knows they're coming. In women, the risk of infection after every childbirth. In men, after every scratch. In children, after every cough. Child mortality is catastrophic. According to historians' calculations, more than 40% of children die before the age of 5. Disease spares no one. Parents bury babies in the same clothes they slept in, sometimes with the mother. In case of complications after childbirth, a woman dies within 24 hours. Her death is expected, not a tragedy, but the order of things. Outbreaks happen regularly. Before the Black Death of the 14th century, Europe is already shaken by smallpox, measles, dysentery. Then comes the plague. According to modern estimates, between 1347 and 1352, up to 60% of Europe's population dies, dying in agony, unaided. Plowmen, knights, monks, children, pregnant women, all are buried in mass graves, quickly, without a funeral. The average life expectancy of peasants is 25-30 years, and that's if you're lucky. If you survived infancy, did not die of a cold, did not catch a disease in a bathhouse, did not burn in a fever, did not get gangrene from a simple cut. People over 40 are rare. Over 50, almost a legend. They are listened to, feared, and respected as those who have cheated death itself. The smell of death is not frightening, it's part of life. It's inhaled every day in the stable, in the hut, in the street, from dead animals, from rotting wounds, from bodies that have not been buried. Winter in the Middle Ages is not a season, but a threat of extinction. A time when the earth shackles with cold, firewood runs out, and night lasts longer than life. There are no batteries, no warm floors, no synthetic jackets to protect against wind and moisture, and there is no choice but to endure. A peasant's hut does not keep out the cold. Its walls of wattle and clay do not keep the heat in. There are gaps between the boards. The drafts walk on the floor, which is frozen through. There are no windows. A window is a slit plugged with a rag or a board. The roof is straw or shingle, often leaks, especially in thaws. The only source of heat is an open hearth in the middle of the room. It is heated during the day as long as there is kindling. At night, the coals are buried in the ashes to keep warm. Wood is preserved. Forests belong to the feudal lord. An illegal felling is punishable by fine, corporal punishment, or prison. People sleep on damp straw bales, covering themselves with coarse cloth. Skins are rare. Often the whole family, including infants and old people, sleep in one bed or on the floor, huddled closely together to keep their bodies warm. Animals, chickens, goats, pigs, sleep in the same room. They are both warm and cared for. The clothes are rough and heavy, woolen shirt, linen socks, straps instead of buttons. The shoes are leather clogs, often holey. Woolen socks are rare. There are no mittens. They work and sleep with the same clothes. There are no shifts. Dampness, sweat, soot, and stench accumulate for weeks. Outside, it's freezing wind, slush, and ice. Home insulation is an unknown concept. Insulation doesn't exist. Clothes get wet, don't dry, freeze right on the body. People move around slouching with their hands pressed against their bodies. Any gust of wind can be fatal. Winter is also a time of illness. Colds turn into pneumonia. Coughs don't subside for weeks. The damp cold eats away at joints. Old people and children often don't live to see spring. Rheumatic pains worsen in women. Wounds received in the field fester in men. There is no one to treat their illnesses. There are no medicines and nowhere to keep warm. Supplies are running low. What was saved from the fall is almost eaten. Turnips are frozen. Cabbage is rotten. Grain is gone. Corned beef is smoking in the smoke. But there's not much left. Milk, not given. The cattle starve themselves. Often starvation begins in winter. People gnaw bark, boil old leather, eat moldy flour. Scurvy, weakness, dizziness appear. For those who live outside the village, on the road, camping, in exile, winter is especially cruel. Without shelter, without food, without fire, a person does not survive longer than a few days. In the cities, it is a little easier. There are workshops, ovens, stone walls. But even there, the poor are freezing. Coal stoves stink. Clothes are the same as in summer. The coals are stolen. They burn everything that burns, even doorboards. Winter in the Middle Ages was a test of body and spirit. No wonder that in folk beliefs, winter was often associated with death, spring as deliverance. But not everyone managed to live to see it. Could you survive 3 months sleeping on the ground in sub-zero temperatures without warm clothes or food? In the Middle Ages, war is not a separate event. It's a part of life. Cyclical, inevitable, merciless. It wasn't chosen, it wasn't voted on, it wasn't discussed. It began as rain begins, suddenly, noisily, often with blood and crying, and as a rule, it never came alone. War in the peasant's mind is not knights in shining armor. It is the sound of hooves, screams, flames, looting, and funeral silence after the army leaves. Political reasons were distant and unimportant. People lived on the land, fought for bread, and died because of someone else's enmity, an inherited dispute, or the whim of a feudal lord. When a feudal lord gathered his militia, he didn't ask. The collector simply came and told him who to send to the unit. Sometimes it was the head of the family, sometimes a teenager if the father was needed in the field, sometimes both. Refusal meant rebellion. Rebellion meant death or execution. The feudal lord had a right to the life and death of his men. The assembled soldiers were not trained. No maneuvers, no tactics, no discipline. Just a short instruction. Stay close to the banner. Don't run away. Don't lose your weapon. Peasants fought with whatever was at hand: pitchforks, scythes, axes, clubs. Rarely old heavy swords or rusty spears. The warriors of the people were called gray masses, living barricades that held back the onslaught of the enemy while the knights prepared the decisive blow. In battle, they were thrown forward. They were the first to die. An arrow, a crossbow bolt, a spear thrust. No armor, no chance. Noble prisoners were taken for ransom. Commoners were not. They were killed, quickly or painfully depending on the mood of the victors, or simply left to die in the field. A peasant captured by an enemy army had no value. He was ballast, a burden, a target. Bodies after the battle lay for weeks, rotting in the sun or in the snow. They were not buried. Often relatives were afraid to go out to fetch the bodies. The enemy might return. Dogs and crows completed the slaughter. But even those who did not make it to the front line were not so lucky. The armies passed through villages, burning barns, taking cattle and women. They left behind hunger, disease, ruins. There was no compensation. It was considered the natural course of war. If an enemy army approached the city, a siege would begin. It was hell. Inside, hunger, fear, disease. Food was hidden, shared, stolen. Dogs were the first to die, then rats, then people. There were cases of cannibalism. When the walls fell, everyone was slaughtered. The warriors didn't discriminate: man, woman, child. Victory was an excuse for reprisals. After the war, the peasant was left to rebuild a field, a burnt house, a maimed body, or not to rebuild. Many simply did not return. Maimed, blinded, traumatized, they could not plow and died in hunger. Women often remained widows, sometimes pregnant by their enemies. Children grew up in fear, villages died out, disappeared from maps. They were never rebuilt, they were simply forgotten. In the Middle Ages, war was not heroism, but a mechanism of destruction. The commoner is not a soldier, but a sacrificial material, called to die for someone he has not even seen in person. In the Middle Ages, a trial is not a chance, but a judgment. Not a place where the truth was judged, but a place to decide who to show to others for their edification. Not everyone knew the laws, but everyone knew that they were easy to break without even knowing how. In the village, rumors are more important than evidence. One neighbor said, "And that's enough. He stole a sack of grain. She's a witch. He hasn't come to church 3 Sundays in a row." Suspicion becomes proof. Fear becomes witness. The court is held in the square, the same place where fish is sold, prayers are said, and festivities are celebrated. Today, instead of a fair, it's an interrogation. It's not the accused who speaks, it's a lord, or a priest, or just someone who has the power to raise his hand and say, "Guilty." An acquittal is rare. More often, it's a confession, and if there's no confession, they get one. The dike, the pincers, the fire. There's no point in screaming. It's part of the act. Resisting only makes you angry. Silence hurts more. Talking hurts faster. It all ends the same way. Those who confess are put on display. Hang them, burn them, chop off their hands, sometimes just shackle them and make them kneel all day. The crowd watches, the kids laugh, someone throws a rotten turnip. Justice is not a defense, it's a show. Women have been particularly unlucky. Their bodies are an object of suspicion. A mole, a scar, a spot is already proof of a connection with the devil. They check for witch marks, burn the skin, pierce it with a needle. If you don't feel pain, it means you are a witch. If you scream, you're still a witch. Prison is not a reprieve, but a slow execution. The pit, the damp, the rats, sometimes just a cage in the air where a man rots alive. They don't feed him, they wait for him to die. And no one is surprised, that's justice too. And no one asks if he was guilty, because in the Middle Ages, guilt is not an act. It's a position, it's silence, it's poverty, it's looking in the wrong place. Could you survive in a world where judgment begins with a rope and ends with a bonfire? In the Middle Ages, work is not a choice or a path. It is a form of existence inseparable from the fact of life itself. It is not discussed, it is not named, it just is. Like breath, like cold, like death. Each day begins before dawn, when the sky is not yet colored even by the first reflections. A day is not a clock, but a piece of light that must be squeezed out to the drop. With the first cries of the rooster, to the cattle, to the field, to the water, everything ends in darkness, with the hum of the fire and the creaking of joints. Plowing in the spring, the land is heavy and damp. Peasants lift layers with bare hands or wooden tools. Not everyone has oxen. Many pull the harrow by themselves, the whole family. Their hands are covered in blood. Their backs are bent. The sun is merciless. Summer is the harvest, it's hell. Scorching heat, ripening fields, scythes, sickles. Every ear is like a chance to survive the winter. No gloves, no protection. Fingers cut off, feet bleeding, shoulders burned by the sun. Hunger is not uncommon in summer. Everything goes into stockpiles. People work on empty stomachs. In the fall, everything at once. Gather, dry, stack, bury, salt, knit, cut. Grain in sacks, roots in pits, straw under the roof, fuel in the stable. If you make a mistake in quantity, one of the children will die in winter. In winter, it seems like it should be easier, but it isn't. They clean ditches, tie nets, get water from the ice. They catch small game, mend roofs, fix cracks in walls. The frost burns, the house is cold. Firewood is running out, the stove is smoking. The work goes on. Men mod in the field, in the forge, with the axe. Women are there, at home and nearby, cooking, washing, weaving, growing, healing. Women have a double burden. Their labor is not only visible, but also hidden. No one notices how much they do. They just consider it natural. Children, and from childhood in the hands of work. First they herd goats, then they carry water, then they go to the field with their mother. At 12, they're like adults. Toys have no place. Old people, if still alive, continue to work, slowly, painfully, on their knees. No pension, no rest, no right to enough already. No iron for everyone. There is no blacksmith in every village. Tools are homemade. A wooden shovel, a stone knife, a scythe which is sharpened over and over until it becomes a stump. If it breaks, they fix it. If it cannot be repaired, they work without it. The dishes are molded by hand. Ropes are spun from nettles. Shoes are sewn from leftover leather. Houses are built by the whole community. Everything around them is the result of labor, not bought, made. Muscle aches all the time. My back starts to bend by the time I'm 20. Hands shake from the sharp metal and wooden handle. After a meal, not rest, but another job. After sickness, back to the field. No days to recover. Broken arm, now the family starves. One dies, the rest have to work. There's no substitute. No money, no wages. Everything the peasants do is a duty to the Lord, to the church, to the land. Tribute in kind. Taxes are part of the harvest. If you don't pay, they take your food, your plot, your child, sometimes your life. To refuse labor is to die, not of hunger, but of punishment, banishment, helplessness. The Lord does not ask, he demands. The church blesses, but does not release. The earth will not forgive. Holidays in the Middle Ages are a ritual, not a respite. You have to cook, clean, scrub, bake, dress the children. Joy under the oppression of duty. After the holiday, you have to work twice as hard to catch up. There is no right to rest. The old man continues to work as long as he can hold a scythe or a cane. He is not fed for nothing. He has to be useful, even if it's to sit by the fire and fix baskets, even if he can no longer hear or see. And when he dies, no one says, finally rested. They say, it's going to get harder now. In the Middle Ages, no one says, I work to live. Rather, I live because I work. Work doesn't make a man better. It doesn't make him respectable. It doesn't make him happy. It just is, without end, no purpose, until death. A medieval woman does not choose who to be. Her life begins in duty and ends in silence, often in an unmarked grave outside the village. She does not own the land, does not decide her own fate, does not participate in councils, but she is the one who holds everything together: the house, the field, family, the village. From an early age, labor, spinning, washing in ice water, taking care of the younger ones, cooking, cleaning. Then marriage, not by love, but by calculation, to join plots, families, debts. Consent is not asked. choice is impossible. Pregnancy is an ordeal. No doctors, there is no sterility. Childbirth is delivered by the same village women, to screams in the dark on straw. Blood is commonplace. Death in childbirth is too. Babies die often. A woman in the village works not less and often more than a man, but her labor is not seen, not honored, not mentioned in chronicles. It's taken for granted, as something natural, like air which is used as and not noticed. Family is not just a matter of blood kinship, it is a matter of survival. If one person falls out, an old man, a child, a husband, the whole system collapses. Together they harvest crops, together they survive diseases, together they hold the defense in a hungry year. It is women who are the first to feel the distress, the first to notice the disappearance of supplies, the first to lose health, the first to give up food for the sake of their children. They wash clothes, clean the wounded, bury the dead, get up in the morning before anyone else to flood the hearth. Respect is scarce, even less support. The role of women is limited and obligatory. For breaking the norms, rumors, condemnation, banishment, for insolence, accusations of witchcraft, for silence, oblivion. But it is women who are the heart of the village. Without their inconspicuous, everyday exploits, there would be no harvest, no domestic warmth, no care, no continuation of the family. Without them, it would not be the family that would survive. The whole village would disappear. In a world where death is everywhere and there is no explanation, faith becomes an anchor. In the Middle Ages, it is impossible to understand human life without its religious basis. Religion here is not a spiritual choice. It is everything: language, order, morality, fear, hope, right and death. It is the air the village breathes. And at the same time, it is the chain that holds everyone back. The church stands at the very center, both geographically and mentally. Stone or wooden, small or monastery, it rises above the roofs of the huts as a reminder that God sees everything. The bell tolls at dawn. It is not just a signal to labor, it is a call to obey the established order. It also announces death, gathers for judgment, reminds us of celebration, and plunges us into mourning. The priest is the mediator between earth and heaven. He's the only one who can read. He knows the scriptures, speaks the words in Latin, which the commoners do not understand. His word is law. His instruction is judgment. He baptizes, he baptizes, he baptizes, he baptizes, he baptizes, he baptizes. He crowns, he confesses. Without him, there is no beginning and no end. He is the only one who explains the world in which the village lives. The understanding of the world is built on fear and humility. Every step, every deed is weighed on the invisible scales of sin and virtue. Sickness is punishment, drought is God's wrath, a hurricane, an eclipse, a plague, a sign. Anything inexplicable is dangerous. Anything strange is suspicious. In this world, the unknown is more frightening than death. The church is not just an institution. It is an authority structure with the power to decide who is sinful and who is saved. Every person's life is framed by rituals. Baptism as a baby, confession before death, communion at Easter, fasting on Fridays. Breaking the fast, skipping the service. Profanity, sinful thoughts are all recorded. All of this can be punished. The church calendar regulates everything. More than 130 days a year are fasting days. You can't eat meat, you can't work, you can't get married. Even intimacy is regulated by the church. Wrong days are a sin. A wedding not according to the rules is annulled. Everyone knows when it is a holiday, but few know why. The main thing is to follow, not to violate, to be afraid. The cemetery is an extension of the church. To be buried in consecrated ground is the last hope for the salvation of the soul. Suicides, heretics, witches are buried behind fences in forests at crossroads. These graves are not marked, they are avoided. The souls of such people supposedly find no rest and may return. But the Inquisition is particularly frightening. Founded in the 13th century by order of Pope Gregory IX, it is an instrument of control and intimidation. Its purpose is to detect deviations from dogma. Whoever thinks differently is a heretic. Whoever cures with herbs is a witch. Whoever asks why is already a suspect. Torture, denunciation, execution, legalized. When a name comes up, interrogation begins. They torture him to get him to confess. If he confesses, he's guilty. If he doesn't confess, he's stubborn and lying. There's no escape. Yet faith is not only fear, it is a comfort, especially in poverty and before death. It promises that there will be a reward for suffering, that after pain, hunger, injustice, there will be paradise. Somewhere out there, beyond the clouds, awaits the kingdom of heaven. And for the sake of this hope, the peasants work, pray, endure. Submissiveness is not weakness, it is a form of survival. Faith is the only light in a world where darkness seems eternal. To survive in the Middle Ages is not just to live to see another day. It means knowing how to live in a world where nothing is guaranteed, where a mistake costs life and ignorance costs death. It is not a question of strength, but of skills. Skills that almost no one has today. The man of the Middle Ages is a living instrument of survival. He knows when to plant grain without a calendar. He knows when rain is coming, by the wind, by the sky, by the behavior of birds. He knows how to make fire without matches, without a lighter, without gas, just from rubbers, flint, and luck. He knows how to build a house out of earth, straw, and clay, how to make rope out of flax, how to weave a basket, how to mend shoes, how to process a carcass and preserve meat without refrigeration. It's not a craft, it's a necessity. If you don't know how to do it, you die. Medieval man navigates by the sun, by shade, by the moss on the trees. He knows where to find water, where to find edible herbs, how to fish without a rod. He is his own healer. He makes infusions, applies leaves, bandages wounds. He has no medicine cabinet, only memory and experience passed down through generations. He holds an axe properly, has been sharpening the blade since childhood, fixing a wagon, straightening a knife. He knows how to deliver a baby, sew up a wound, kill a beast. He knows how to behave when he meets a wolf, how to ward off a stranger, how not to give off fear. And even a child is not helpless. At the age of 5, he is already driving cattle. At 7, he is carrying water. At 10, he is working in the field on an equal footing with adults. His childhood is a training for survival, not an expectation of the future. There is no learn later time in the Middle Ages. Everything happens here and now. You get burned, you get a scar. You don't notice it, you die. Lose an axe, no firewood. People live in a world where knowledge is not abstract. It is life. History knows isolated cases when modern man found himself in conditions similar to those. Disasters, wars, isolation. But even then, those who could do things with their hands survived. The Middle Ages is not about strength. It's about skill. It's about adaptation. It's about lack of choice. Even an aristocrat or a monk knew a craft. Monks had scriptoriums where they copied books, brewed beer, grew herbs. Knights had training, codex, hunting. No one was useless. Everyone knew how to do something, otherwise they wouldn't have survived. Could you make a fire in the wind? Mend a shoe made of rawhide? Boil a soup of sweet and sorrow when you have nothing? Write about it in the comments.